Welcome to my channel. Here, we share inspiring stories of brave and strong people. Maybe you'll see yourself or someone you know in these stories. Thank you for watching. At Harbor's Edge Veterans Hospital, Nurse Emily Carter was known for her diligence and calm demeanor. But beneath the surface of her quiet shifts, Emily had uncovered a secret that no one wanted her to see. Late-night shipments, missing records, and a name that sent chills down her spine: Blackgate Industries. What could a defense contractor possibly want with a hospital? The deeper Emily dug, the more she realized she was unraveling a conspiracy far larger and far deadlier than she could have imagined. As the walls closed in around her, one question haunted her. How far would they go to silence her? Leave a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. If you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring journey tomorrow. The hospital was quiet. The kind of stillness Emily Carter had grown used to after 15 years of night shifts. Harbor's Edge Veterans Hospital never seemed to sleep entirely. But tonight was unusually calm. Emily ran her usual rounds, checking on patients and updating charts. However, as she passed the supply room, something unusual caught her eye: a delivery manifest on the counter with several blank spaces where records should have been. She frowned, flipping through the pages. The inventory listed a shipment of medical supplies arriving late at night. Yet nothing in the room matched the manifest's description. Expensive diagnostic equipment was logged, but there were only unmarked crates stacked in the corner. That's odd, she muttered. The sound of footsteps made her pause. Emily ducked into the shadows as Dr. Lucas Grant entered the room. His phone pressed to his ear. His voice, usually calm and professional, was strained. "No, the next shipment is scheduled for tomorrow. Just make sure it's handled quietly," he said, lowering his voice. "Yes. I know what's at stake. Keep it off the books." Emily's stomach tightened. Dr. Grant was rarely anything but composed. But now, there was an edge of fear in his tone. When he turned to leave, Emily stayed hidden until his footsteps faded. Returning to the desk, she glanced at the manifest again. Her curiosity piqued. Something wasn't right. Later that night, Emily accessed the hospital's digital records in the break room. She searched for the shipment's details, but the files were incomplete. Frustrated, she expanded her search, combing through related manifests. That's when she found it: a pattern of discrepancies in delivery logs over the past 3 months. Late-night shipments, inconsistent inventory, and vague descriptions all pointed to one thing: someone was hiding something. Her pulse quickened as she cross-referenced delivery dates with air traffic reports in the area. Private flights, scheduled in the middle of the night, corresponded with the hospital's delivery times. The names attached to the flight logs were redacted. But one name caught her attention: Blackgate Industries. Emily's breath caught. Blackgate was a defense contractor known for its military connections and shadowy reputation. What would a company like that have to do with a veterans hospital? The question lingered, pressing her to dig deeper. She returned to the storage room, examining the unmarked crates. Each one had a small label with a serial number and a barcode. Using her phone, she scanned one of the codes. The search results left her stunned. It linked back to a shipment of military-grade medical equipment, items far beyond what the hospital could reasonably afford or use. Her thoughts raced as she pieced the fragments together. The shipments, the private flights, the missing inventory, it all pointed to something far more dangerous than a simple clerical error. Emily knew she needed more proof. She accessed the hospital's secure database, hoping to find additional records. The deeper she went, the more connections she found between the hospital's accounts and Blackgate Industries. Payments disguised as routine expenses led to off-the-book transactions. Finally, she found it, a file detailing a recent procurement initiative involving Blackgate. The language was vague, but the sums of money involved were staggering. It didn't take much to realize that whatever was happening wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Lost in thought, Emily didn't notice the shadow moving outside the break room window. Someone was watching her. Unaware of the danger closing in, Emily saved the files onto a flash drive and pocketed it. She didn't know who she could trust. But she knew one thing for certain: she'd stumbled onto something far bigger than she could have imagined. Emily closed the door to her modest home. The flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. Her husband, Jack Carter, sat at the kitchen table. His boots still caked with dirt from his latest deployment, a Force Recon Marine. Jack had seen his fair share of danger, but the look on Emily's face made him sit up straighter. "I found something," Emily began, sliding the flash drive onto the table. Jack tilted his head, his sharp eyes scanning her face. "What kind of something?" he asked, his tone cautious. Emily hesitated, then began recounting the discrepancies in the hospital's records, the private flights, and the connection to Blackgate Industries. Jack's expression darkened as she spoke. "You shouldn't have gone digging into this." Jack said, his voice low. "People who deal with companies like Blackgate don't play around. This is dangerous. They're using the hospital." "Jack," Emily said, her voice firm. "I couldn't ignore it." Jack sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Let me look into this. But promise me you'll tread carefully. Don't poke the bear." The next morning, Emily opened her locker at the hospital to find a small envelope inside. Her name was scrawled across the front in uneven letters. She opened it and froze. Inside was a single piece of paper with the words, "Stop asking questions." Her breath hitched, but she quickly shoved the note into her pocket. Glancing around the locker room, it was empty, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Later that day, Emily's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered, but no one spoke on the other end. The silence was deafening, and after a few seconds, the line went dead. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. That evening, Emily couldn't shake the unease as she sifted through more hospital records. She found new links between Blackgate Industries and suspicious shipments. Some of the crates delivered to the hospital matched serial numbers for military-grade equipment, including advanced weaponry. She felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just smuggling medical supplies, this was an illegal arms operation. Emily decided to tell Jack everything. As she laid out the new evidence, he leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "This is bigger than I thought," he said. "Blackgate doesn't just deal in weapons, they've got connections in high places. If they know you're onto them, they won't hesitate to come after you." Jack's tone was calm, but Emily could see the tension in his posture. "You have to stop digging." Let me handle this," he said. "No, Jack," Emily said, shaking her head. "If I stop now, they'll get away with it. Someone has to expose them." Jack didn't argue. Instead, he stood and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. He unzipped it to reveal a tactical kit, gear he hadn't touched since his last deployment. "If you're going to keep pushing, then I'm going to be ready." Unbeknownst to them, Victor Romano, the mastermind behind the operation, was already aware of Emily's investigation. A man in his mid-50s with sharp features and an intimidating presence. Romano sat in a dimly lit office surrounded by monitors. One screen displayed a live feed of Emily at the hospital, working at her computer. "She's getting too close," Romano said, his voice cold. If she finds the shipments tied to the testing site, she could blow the whole operation. Handle it. His men nodded and left the room without a word. Romano leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he watched the screen. You should have stayed in your lane. Nurse Carter, he muttered. At home. Jack inspected the locks on the windows and doors, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Emily, unaware of Romano's surveillance, continued to sift through records, determined to uncover the truth. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she didn't realize she'd already become a target. The clock had barely struck midnight when the sound of shattering glass jolted Emily Carter awake. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, her heart pounding. Jack had stepped out to meet a contact, leaving her alone in the house. The faint shuffle of footsteps confirmed her worst fears. Someone was inside. She quickly typed a message to Jack, "Someone's here," before she could hit send. Her bedroom door burst open. Two men in black tactical gear rushed in, guns drawn. Emily backed against the wall, clutching her phone. But they moved too quickly. One grabbed her arm while the other snatched the phone and threw it across the room. "You're coming with us," the taller of the two said, his voice low and firm. As they dragged her down the hallway, another figure entered the house, Dr. Lucas Grant. His face was pale, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. "Leave her alone," he shouted, stepping in front of the men. The shorter man sneered. "Get out of the way. Document. You've done your part." Dr. Grant held his ground, his hands trembling. "She doesn't know anything. You don't have to do this." The taller man didn't hesitate. He struck Dr. Grant across the face with the butt of his gun, sending him crumpling to the floor. Emily screamed, struggling against the men's grip. But they were too strong. As they dragged her outside, Emily spotted her phone lying in the hallway. She silently activated the emergency distress signal Jack had installed, a simple swipe and press. The phone buzzed faintly before the screen went dark. But the signal had been sent. The men forced Emily into the back of a dark van. The ride was silent except for the low hum of the engine. She glanced around, noting the three men seated in the back with her, their weapons casually resting on their laps. After what felt like an eternity, the van stopped, and Emily was led into a large, dimly lit warehouse. Crates were stacked high, many marked with military codes and unrecognizable symbols. Industrial lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor. Victor Romano stood in the center of the room, his tailored suit immaculate despite the grittiness of the setting. His sharp, calculating eyes scanned Emily as she was pushed into a chair and zip-tied. "Emily Carter," he said, his tone almost conversational. "You've been very busy for a nurse." She didn't respond, her jaw tight as she met his gaze. Romano stepped closer, his presence both commanding and suffocating. "You're smart. Smarter than most people I deal with. That's why I'm giving you an opportunity." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Opportunity for what?" "To live," Romano said simply. "You have access to the hospital's records, its supply chain. You could help me make this operation run more smoothly. In return, you and your husband get to stay out of a shallow grave." Emily forced herself to stay calm. "And if I refuse?" Romano smirked. "You won't refuse. You're a nurse, you care about survival. Don't you?" Emily's mind raced. She couldn't afford to provoke him. "I'll think about it," she said cautiously. Romano leaned in, his smirk fading. "You don't have much time to think. Nurse Carter. Choose wisely." As Romano turned away to speak with one of his men, Emily's eyes scanned the room. The crates stacked nearby were labeled with serial numbers she recognized from the hospital records. She noted the patterns and mentally cataloged everything: the placement of the guards, the layout of the warehouse, and the faint hum of machinery in the background. One of the guards, Mateo Cruz, lingered nearby, his expression less hostile than the others. Emily caught his eye, sensing his unease. She filed that observation away for later. Nearby, Romano's voice rose as he spoke to his men. "She's useful for now, but once we're done with her, make sure she disappears. We can't afford loose ends." Emily's stomach sank, but she kept her face neutral. She couldn't let them see her fear. As the guards repositioned themselves, Emily's eyes drifted to the faint red glow of a security camera in the corner. She knew Jack would come for her. She just had to buy enough time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel. It means so much to us. Now, let's get back to the story. The alert on Jack Carter's phone buzzed twice, a distinct tone he'd heard only in emergencies. He checked the screen, his blood running cold at the sight of the location ping, Emily's distress signal. Without a second thought, he stood, interrupting the debriefing with his commanding officer. "Emergency," Jack said tersely, already heading for the door. His reputation as one of the sharpest Force Recon Marines left no room for questions. Jack drove to a secure location where he met FBI agent Lauren Thompson, a sharp, no-nonsense operative with a history of tackling high-level corruption cases. Jack wasted no time. "Emily's been taken. I need everything you have on Blackgate Industries." Thompson nodded, already pulling up files on her laptop. "We've been monitoring Blackgate for months. They're smuggling military-grade weapons and diverting prototypes for illegal testing. Civilians have been caught in the crossfire, and they're covering it up through shell companies and corrupt officials. If your wife found out about this, she's in serious danger." Jack leaned over the screen, scanning the data. The shipments Emily had flagged were part of a larger network. And the protection? Who's backing them? Thompson hesitated. "Some military officials are complicit. High-ranking ones. They're ensuring the operation runs smoothly by diverting attention and resources. It's why we haven't been able to make a move. Any action could tip them off." Jack clenched his fists. The realization that those in uniform were betraying their country boiled his blood. But he pushed the anger aside. "Do you have a location on where they might be holding Emily?" Thompson pulled up a map. "We intercepted chatter from Blackgate's private network. There's a warehouse outside the city. It's heavily guarded. And if they think they've been compromised, they won't hesitate to clean house." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the chance." Thompson raised a brow. "You know this isn't sanctioned, right? If this goes sideways, I don't care." Jack interrupted. "Emily's my wife. I'm not sitting back while they put her life on the line." Thompson nodded, impressed by his resolve. "Then let's get to work. I'll pull in a team from the National Guard for backup. You'll need eyes on the ground and support if this turns into a firefight." As plans came together, Jack noticed something off in the comms traffic. A message had been sent from within his network, warning someone about a potential raid. His eyes narrowed. "Thompson, we've got a mole." Thompson's fingers flew over the keyboard. "I'll trace it. But if Blackgate knows we're coming, you'll have to act fast." Jack grabbed his gear, his movements quick and deliberate. "You handle the mole. I'll get my team ready and hit the warehouse before they have a chance to move her." By the time Thompson tracked the source, Jack was already en route to the warehouse with a small strike team he trusted implicitly. The mole's identity confirmed what Jack had feared. A mid-level officer in his unit had been feeding information to Blackgate in exchange for bribes. Thompson's voice came through his earpiece. "We've got the mole secured." He didn't have time to warn them about the raid. "You're clear. But you'll need to move quickly." Jack's team arrived near the warehouse under the cover of darkness. Through binoculars, he surveyed the area. Guards were stationed at every entrance, with more patrolling the perimeter. Crates were being loaded onto trucks, confirming this was the hub of Blackgate's smuggling operation. Jack's voice was steady as he gave orders. 2 teams. One breaches the front while the other secures the perimeter. No one gets out unless they're in cuffs. As his team prepared for the assault, Jack's thoughts lingered on Emily. He knew she was strong, but every second they delayed put her in more danger. "Hang on, he muttered under his breath. "I'm coming for you." The team moved into position, weapons ready. The mission to save Emily and dismantle the operation was about to begin. And Jack knew failure wasn't an option. The stillness of the warehouse shattered as the National Guard's battering ram broke through the main gate. Jack Carter led the charge, his team of Marines and National Guard soldiers fanning out in perfect synchronization. Romano's guards were ready, and the air erupted with gunfire. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal crates, and shouts filled the cavernous space. "Push forward. Clear the perimeter." Jack barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Emily Carter sat zip-tied to a chair near the center of the warehouse, her mind racing. The firefight had sent Romano's men scrambling, and she used the distraction to her advantage. Her eyes darted to Mateo Cruz, the young guard who had shown signs of doubt earlier. He was stationed near her, his grip on his rifle uncertain. "Mateo," Emily whispered urgently. "You don't have to do this. You know what they're doing here is wrong." He hesitated, his gaze flickering between her and the unfolding chaos. "If I help you, Romano will kill me," he muttered. "If you don't, you'll go down with him when this place falls." Emily pressed. "You can do the right thing. Help me stop this." A nearby explosion rocked the warehouse, shaking loose crates from a high stack. Mateo made his decision. He cut the zip ties around Emily's wrists and handed her a keycard. "Server rooms down the hall. That's where they keep the records." Emily nodded, her heart pounding as she darted toward the hallway. Romano's guards were too distracted by the firefight to notice her slipping away. Jack and his team advanced methodically, taking cover behind crates as they moved closer to the warehouse's core. The guards were well armed, but their coordination faltered under pressure. Jack spotted a cluster of them near the loading dock and signaled his men. "Suppressive fire on my mark." Meanwhile, Emily reached the server room. The door slid open with a hiss as she swiped the keycard. Inside, rows of blinking servers hummed quietly, oblivious to the chaos outside. Emily found a terminal and began searching for the incriminating files. Her hands trembled as she navigated the system. The files were buried deep, but she eventually found them: detailed logs of shipments, payments, and even video footage of experimental weapons tests. Her stomach turned as she saw the damage inflicted on civilians in the testing areas. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached. Emily froze, her heart hammering. One of Romano's guards burst into the room, his rifle raised. Before he could react, Mateo appeared behind him and struck him with the butt of his weapon, knocking him out. "Let's move," Mateo urged, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Emily grabbed a flash drive from the desk and began transferring the files. The process felt agonizingly slow, every second stretching into an eternity. Come on, she whispered. Back in the main warehouse, Romano was retreating toward the rear exit. Jack caught sight of him and gave chase. his boots pounding against the concrete floor. Romano fired a few shots over his shoulder, forcing Jack to duck behind a stack of crates. "You should have stayed out of this, Marine," Romano shouted, his voice echoing. Jack didn't respond. He moved silently, circling around to cut off Romano's escape. The file transfer completed, and Emily pocketed the flash drive. "Let's go," she said to Matteo. They slipped out of the server room, sticking to the shadows. Guards were still firing sporadically, but the tide of the battle had shifted in favor of Jack's team. Near the loading dock, Jack finally cornered Romano. The crime boss dropped his empty pistol and pulled a knife from his belt. "You think you've won?" Romano sneered, circling Jack like a predator. "Blackgate is bigger than me. Bigger than you. This changes nothing." Jack didn't reply. He lunged forward, disarming Romano in one swift motion. The two grappled, their movements quick and brutal. Romano landed a punch, but Jack shrugged it off, his training kicking in. With a final, decisive strike, Jack slammed Romano to the ground and restrained him with zip ties. "It's over," Jack said coldly. Romano spat at the ground, his bravado fading as the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Emily and Matteo emerged from the shadows just as Jack secured Romano. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, his eyes scanning Emily for injuries. "I got the files," Emily said, holding up the flash drive. "Everything they've done is on here." Jack nodded, relief washing over him. "Good. Let's finish this." The National Guard secured the remaining guards, and the warehouse was cleared. Emily handed the flash drive to Agent Lauren Thompson, who arrived moments later. "This is everything we need," Thompson said, her expression grim. "Blackgate won't be able to talk their way out of this." As the dust settled, Jack and Emily stood side by side, watching as Romano and his men were loaded into police vehicles. The operation was over, but the fight for justice had just begun. The fallout was swift and devastating for Blackgate Industries. The files Emily had recovered proved beyond doubt that the company had been smuggling military-grade weapons and conducting illegal testing on civilians. Within hours of the raid, federal agents executed arrests across multiple states, targeting high-ranking officials, military collaborators, and Blackgate executives. Victor Romano, now in federal custody, maintained his silence. But the evidence spoke louder than any confession. The flash drive Emily had retrieved contained video documentation, payment logs, and communications that implicated dozens of individuals in the sprawling conspiracy. Matteo Cruz, the guard who had turned against Romano, stepped forward as a whistleblower. His testimony revealed the internal workings of the operation, from how weapons were transported under the guise of medical supplies to the involvement of corrupt military officials who had shielded the enterprise. His decision to cooperate granted him immunity and cemented his role in dismantling the network. At Harbor's Edge Veterans Hospital, reforms were swift. A federal oversight committee was established to ensure transparency, and new protocols were implemented to prevent such abuses from ever happening again. Emily, hailed as a hero by the local media, became a symbol of courage and integrity. Patients and staff alike looked to her as a reminder that one person's determination could bring down even the most powerful of adversaries. At home, Jack and Emily sat on the porch, the fading sunlight casting warm hues across their faces. The past weeks had been harrowing, but as they looked out at the quiet neighborhood, there was a sense of peace. "We stopped them," Emily said softly, her fingers intertwined with Jack's. Jack nodded, his expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. "Yeah, we did." and now they'll answer for what they've done. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a light breeze carried the sound of distant laughter from a neighbor's house. On the small table beside them, a folded newspaper lay open. The bold headline reading, "Blackgate Conspiracy Exposed, Justice Delivered." In that moment, Emily and Jack didn't need words. Their bond, forged through hardship, had grown stronger, and they both knew the fight had been worth it. Blackgate Industries fell, and justice was served. But what if Emily hadn't acted? How often are powerful crimes hidden in plain sight? Share your thoughts. Could you risk everything to expose the truth like Emily did? Share your thoughts in this story with others. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.